Hello everyone, welcome to Fire Emblem Awakening tier list review. I am Mecha, and I'm going to go over this partially constructed Awakening tier list that I've made to celebrate the big tier list. And as always, I am joined by an absolute expert in the game that is here. Awakening was never my strong suit, and this is one game that I'm especially ignorant on. But thankfully, to compensate for that and then some, I have here Casey. How are you doing, Casey?
I'm doing great, Mecha. Yeah, I'm Casey. You can find me at Cat1803 at most places. You can call me Cat or Casey. Doesn't really matter. I respond to both. And Awakening is was my first FE, is my favorite FE, and is actually my favorite video game of all time.
Yes. For those that don't know, how obsessed with Awakening are you? How well do you know this game?
Um, Better than I know some of my classes that I've had to take for undergrad. Um, uh, I I'm a regular Lunatic Plus player, and I have, at last count, almost 6,000 hours in the game.
6,000 hours. That's so much. Just for reference, only just learned this just now. So Casey usually plays on like Lunatic Plus, and I was like, okay, this tier list is going to be based on hard mode, and I was just assuming like, okay, maybe he'll do like one little playthrough to test out like what the enemy stats are. Casey, how much did you play again?
Did 6 hard mode
Six
playthroughs.
hard mode. I didn't ask. This is like, I feel like I'm doing unpaid labor here, but okay. Let's make use of this homework that you did so elaborately. So, hard mode in Awakening is known for being fairly easy overall. In fact, you kind of have to try to not trivialize it. Like the easiest way to play it is just to have Robin murder everything by himself, basically, with maybe some assists here and there. So everyone else is kind of being tiered on the assumption like, okay, you want to use this unit. How good are they gonna be? How good are they at like, nuking an entire map or being a good support unit or maybe a parabot or something. I'm assuming for your hard mode runs, you kind of just made a team and went through, right? Like maybe 3 to 4 combat units?
Yeah, usually because I like to high man, so I did like 3 or 4 combat pairs. Um, and there would be a couple that, both units would frontline at some point. Others, it would be one unit as mainly support and the other unit as mainly a frontline. But most of the time, I like to keep it to 3 or 4 combat pairs. Um, and yeah.
It sounds like a good balance between like not making the game too hard for yourself, but still using like a fair amount of units. Basically having some more flavor than just, okay, this unit just solos the game.
Yeah, I think I personally think solos, even on Lunatic Plus, are slightly boring. At
Mm-hmm.
least for me. Like I'm fine watching them, but me playing it, it's just like, oh my gosh, can I get some variety and some difficulty, please?
Ah, yes. I'm glad you brought up that Solo Wing's boring because in the bottom right corner, Casey can't see it, but I'm probably going to put my Frederick solo there that I did ages ago, which is on Lunatic difficulty. So that's my background footage for today. So we can tier these units a little bit. We're going to start from the top and then work our way down. If this video is multiple parts, which it might be, then it might not being, it probably will be, then you can use the timestamp to find the right units. And I mean, that's pretty much all I need to say beforehand. We'll start with the S plus tier, which just has both Robins in it. I don't think we need to elaborate too much on how good Robin is, because most people
No.
watching this will probably already know. Like, there's one video out there. It's like, hey, can you beat Awakening using only Robin and Chrom? And the whole comment section is like, yeah, that's the easiest way to do it by far. Like,
Yeah.
no questions. This is also the only way that I beat Lunatic before I did the Frederick solo. Is just have Robin nuke everything. It's so easy. So I guess my question to you about Robin, multiple questions actually. The first question I have is like basically, what would the best build be? Is it Nosferatu tanking, like perhaps with the Dark Mage, or is there something better than that on hard mode? And what differences matter between the two Robins? Those are like the main questions I have for Robin for you.
Yeah, sure. So because it's hard mode, you actually have a lot of flexibility with Robin's build. Obviously, I would say there's more flexibility for female Robin because she can go Pegasus to Dark Flyer or reclass to Dark Flyer at some point and get Gale Force. We should almost have like a counter somewhere for how often I mentioned Gale Force.
Yeah, I actually didn't try not to mention Guild Force too much when I did this tier list initially because it's such a high level threshold. But Robin has no trouble reaching it, right?
Yeah, because veteran means that even when they've capped their internal level, Robin gets, because a veteran gets minimum of 12 XP per kill, and even on Lunatic, probably even especially more on Lunatic, it built because of the enemy density. It's so easy for Robin to just spiral out of control, which is why I like using units besides them, just because, it's like, okay, difficulty has gone down to nil. But yeah, so common builds that I particularly like, obviously Nosferatu taking, but it's not as easy as you would think if you're not using bonus box items and purchasing from teams, because your first Nosferatu you don't get until chapter 9 when you recruit Tharja, and and then after that you have to make that Nos last until after chapter 13, which is when it's buyable. If you're using bonus box, then that's no real problem. But yeah, so Nostanking is pretty common. It's not my favorite strategy, though Dark Mage is a really solid class to reclass into, even if you're not Nostanking, because of the high magic, the durability,
Oh yeah, it
and
has a lot of defense, right, in this game. It's so stupid.
yeah, it has a lot of defense. And the skills that Dark Mage comes with are really good. Hex is really good. Anathema is even better. Um, Honestly, if you're doing a Robin solo, having Robin with Solidarity, which they will automatically get at level 10, Anathema plus Chrom with a killing edge in the back is just hilarious amounts of destruction early game. So yeah, Dark Mage is a really good option, not just for Nos tanking, but also for the skills and the stats. My personal favorite build is going for Mercenary to get Arms Thrift
Oh yeah, the
and
Armstrong
have
builds.
and have and have a promotion to Hero for Soul. Um, Once you get high enough levels, Soul will be proccing pretty frequently. So it's almost as good as having Nosferatu. Plus, you can use it with stronger weapons than Nosferatu.
It's skill divided by
Um,
2, right, in this game, Soul? Or is it just skill?
Soul is skill percent.
Oh wow, nice.
Um, yeah, it's a little ridiculous. Um, but it's funny to use. Um, Another build that I kind of mentioned offhand that's good for female Robin is just going into Pegasus and then going into Dark Flyer. You can get Gale Force really early that way because of veteran. Um, and also the thing most people mention about the Dark Flyer class is obviously Gale Force, but flying 8 movement tomes are actually really broken. It can be trivializing even on Lunatic Plus, and
It's as good
definitely
as it
on
gets, right?
Lunatic,
You just fly
definitely
over
on
terrain
Hard.
and you just counter enemies. Like, what more do you want, right?
Yeah, and you can go into areas where, like, the only enemies who can attack you are 2 range, so then you don't have to worry about counter.
Oh
Um,
right. Wait. Oh, counter is
yeah,
just a,
like
how much counter is in hard mode? Just on warriors, right?
uh counter, yeah, on hard mode is just on warriors, and only some warriors because it's randomly generated. But it is something you have to watch out for once they start cropping up. Um, on Lunatic, it's all warriors, and on Lunatic Plus, it's like it's a random skill that can spawn on literally any enemy post chapter 2. Um but yeah, so Dark Flyer good for reasons other than Gale Force. The final build I'd like to discuss is Cavalier because one of the good things about Cavalier is you get to keep your sword rank and also have discipline to build your lance rank off of. So you can get to javelins pretty easily. Horse is good. Um, and um, it's kind of up to you whether you want to go Great Knight or Paladin from that. Um, Great Knight obviously has the better skills, but it's not my favorite class. And it's also got the double mounted and armor weakness. Not that there's a whole lot of effective weaponry in hard mode, but it is something to keep in mind if you're going into Great Knight for Luna or whatever. Um, but yeah, those are some good builds. Also, another build that I have seen, it's pretty overkill, is going to Myrmidon for Vantage and then going Dark Mage, because then you can Vantage Nosferatu. I think it's completely overkill for
Yeah,
hard mode, but
yeah.
it is something you can do.
Yeah, I noticed I did a different character with the Vantage Nosferatu build. I forgot which it was. And I almost never used Vengeance in the whole playthrough, and Vantage never barely mattered. So, and that wasn't even
Yeah.
Robin. So I imagine that's kind of a, whatever. You could use that in like higher difficulties maybe, but
Yeah, it's really good on Lunatic in particular.
mhm.
But yeah, little overkill for hard, but if you like overkill, go ahead.
I mean, if you're playing Awakening, I mean, I imagine like overkill to some extent.
Oh yeah. I've gone for um like builds where I'm trying to get as high of a critical damage as I can, you know, Parthia on like a Pegasus Knight with Vengeance or something.
Oh yeah.
The max damage in Awakening is 636, by the way.
Okay, I'm glad. I'm glad. Do I want to know what that is? Is it the Parthia?
Yeah, it's the Parthia bow, yeah.
Okay. That's funny. Okay, so now we know how to make Robin completely overkill busted as if we didn't need to, as if we didn't have that enough already. So I guess, because are we ready to move on from our Robin, by the way? Is that everything that we got?
Yeah.
Okay, I think so too, because we spent 10 minutes talking about it. Which is fine. Usually the units at the top take the most time to discuss anyway, even if they're, like, you think Robin is inherently boring, but there's still like a lot that goes into them. So
Yeah.
I guess the next question is, Frederick, I think you agree that he's the next best, but I guess my main question is, does he belong in S minus, or does he belong in the same tier as Robin, or should he be lowered further? Is he like an actual complete tier below? Because the way the reason I put Frederick here is because he seems very uniquely positioned in Awakening for almost any kind of metagame difficulty, because he has that early game utility where he's obviously super good both as a combat unit and a pair up bot, and then in the mid game he kind of transitions into a pair bot. At least that's the way I use it. I'm not sure how good his long-term viability is. His speed seems kind of low for it. But
Yeah.
there's no one else really like that. Like, everyone else is kind of a growth unit that's kind of not bad early game, although a lot of units are really bad early game, but everyone is bad in the early game compared to Frederick. So, and he still retains longevity as the game goes on as some kind of utility, pair up, effective damage dealer kind of guy. So I guess the question is that accurate? And if so, does it fit where he is right now?
So the thing with Frederick is his growths are actually really excellent. Um, he's got really solid HP, skill, and defense growths, and even his speed isn't that bad. I think people mostly get that impression from his base speed and his cap.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and also Great Knight doesn't have a great speed cap anyway. But yeah, he actually has really good growths. The problem is that until you're getting to being able to kill promoted enemies, you're getting 11 experience per kill, which means it's actually harder in a lot of cases for Frederick to snowball than, say, Robin, of course. Um, and usually at that point, at least on hard mode, those promoted enemies will have higher stats than him. But once he gets to being able to kill promoted enemies, his his growths really start to kick in. And I think he's almost as effective at snowballing as basically anybody else at that point. At least on hard mode. On Lunatic, he does fall off because the promoted enemies have even higher stats. And I've noticed that if he's not within like a Hex or Anathema aura, he does tend to start whiffing a bit. Um, but, you know, uh, a lot of the time with Lunatic, there are going to be units you only use for a little bit because they fall off. So yeah, I think S minus is a good place for Frederick, because he is in that unique position. But like, I've always said this: do not underestimate Fred's actual growths because they're actually very excellent.
Oh yeah, no, absolutely agree. I mean, I think there's probably been a level up or two on him on the bottom right already. Please tell me the footage works, Mecha. I actually did notice that in Lunatic, even later in the game, Frederick was able to hold up, but the solo is obviously not a great indicator because he's getting all the resources, all the stat boosters, all the XP. But yeah, you can kind of keep up, I guess, if he just gets the level ups. But all the problems you mentioned do exist. So all right, glad you agree. Next question, I guess, because I think now we're getting into kind of a weird territory where I'm noticing some things where I'm like, I don't know about that, Mecha. What were you doing in the past? So the A tier has Sumia as the next unit, who I definitely think is like not an S minus tier, so I don't think she should be moving up. The way I usually like to describe Sumia is just early game Pegasus Knight, and if you don't put like a lot of work and resources into her, then she's probably going to be subpar. I like her because I usually have her pair up with Frederick, and they can combine pretty well in hard mode. They kind of fix each other weaknesses.
Oh, yeah.
Frederick gives her a bunch of strength and defense, whereas Sumia gives him speed and mobility, both of which are like really appreciated in some maps. Like having Frederick be able to fly over in the desert map, for example, is just super nice. But
yeah,
they can kind of like, this is pretty universally applicable. Like you can do that to other units, like make him fly with Sumia, and you can also give Frederick's pair up to someone else. So I've had some people in the comment section who were like, Sumia actually isn't that good. It's just Frederick pair up is making her that good. So I think she's worth the investment in that regard, especially in the early game where you don't have any other flyers. But I do see the point that like Sumia's stats do have problems. She does have relatively low bulk, especially physical bulk. She is weak to bows, which have triple might on her in this game, and pretty high might later on that actually like make her very vulnerable to dying. And I generally assume she doesn't reach Gil Force. I had to grind her in my Let's Play, so I have no idea if she actually reaches it normally or not. But I think that kind of makes her... It makes me feel like she should maybe move down, but I'm not entirely sure. So I'm curious what you think.
Yeah, so Sumia is... I will admit that I have some bias because she's one of my favorite characters in Awakening. But Sumia is very good. And even if she has a different pair up than Frederick, because like Frederick gives her the strength and defense she needs, but also a Chrom support will, in her first chapter, will let her double most things. I know for sure that she doubles the archers with his help, and with a dual strike from Chrom, which is not uncommon because of his dual strike plus skill, she can one round the archers. And and with a Fred pair up, she's obviously really good. I'm probably going to make a little bit of a controversial statement, in that even though I think Sumia is the obvious choice for a wife for Chrom, because I think the pair up's really good, and I think the kids that result from it are really good. I think Sumia's best S support partner is actually Frederick, just because they do really complement each other that well. And she obviously has the flight utility, and something I don't see people bring up a whole lot is that she gives +4, I think, skill and speed when she pairs up with someone else.
Yeah,
And there are a lot of people who really appreciate that speed.
yeah, like Frederick.
Yeah, like Frederick.
And I guess
Um,
Fake, I guess.
yeah. Um, and this is one of those weird, quirky differences between Hard and Lunatic, because you earn less experience on Lunatic, but the enemy density is so high that on Lunatic, I have no problem getting Sumia to Gale Force. So in some ways, she's almost better on Lunatic than she is on Hard. Um, and this is just a personal thing, but when I have her pair up with Chrom, I end up reclassing Chrom to a Cavalier, which would give similar pair up bonuses to Great Knight Fred. But yeah, I think Sumia A tier is a perfect spot for her. She does need a lot more, well, a medium amount more investment than like other people who join at that level. But I think she's one of those units where you get pretty high returns. Like, even if you're ignoring the whole Gale Force thing, she can go to Falcon Knight, and rally speed is really good, especially towards the end where you've got some speedier enemies. Obviously, I personally get Gale Force for her first, and we've talked about how busted flying 8-move tomes are. But I think she's a lot more versatile than a lot of people give her credit for. And I think her returns are pretty high given what you do invest into her. At least that's, I hate to be like, oh, that's my experience, but like, I've used her a ton and she's never disappointed me. So.
You're not the only one. I think that's probably the way most people will describe like the Pegasus Knights in this game. Is like, yeah, I use them and this is my experience, so this is how I rate them. It's kind of what it comes down to. But there's math to back it up, so I have no problem with using some personal experience. In fact, sometimes I think people go too hard on like just looking at average stats and looking at like what on paper a unit can do. And like a couple runs in practice will show you like, oh, maybe my theory doesn't actually hold up. So I don't actually have an issue with using personal experience as an argument as long as you acknowledge that your unit might get RNG blessed. But if you're using it for 20 playthroughs, you probably have the data to back it up. So.
Oh yeah, I've used her for way more than 20 playthroughs.
Oh yeah, I forgot 6,000 hours. Yeah. Never mind. Forgot that not all those playthroughs take 300 hours or something. I don't know. I can't do math. Okay, so Sumia staying in A tier at least. We'll see who moves over and under her. Real quick, I'm gonna bring up the pairings because we brought them up. So far, I generally I think it's best to focus on pair-ups as in making units good in combat and like utility or whatever, like Sumia allowing you to fly around one of your other units as a pair-up. We can focus on the actual kids and the S supports when we get to like the actual children character, because I think that's like a great spot to talk about that. And I think sometimes those things will overlap and sometimes they won't at all, and that's also interesting. But I think for now we can stick with like how to make the Gen 1 units good at fighting, basically, with the pair-up system.
Yeah.
Okay, so the next unit I have here is Chrom. I don't remember exactly what my rationale was for putting him here. It probably was partially, well, like, yeah, you can probably solo the game if you wanted to, like Robin. It's just going to take longer because his class is worse and his class options are worse. But I was looking at his data and everything. I remember back when I tiered him and I was like, well, there's nothing really wrong with Chrom. Like, he has as much availability as you can possibly ask for. He's got good pair partners all around him that he can build up supports with really quickly. He has a personal weapon in the rapier, and he's reclassed to Cavalier. So I couldn't really think of anything bad enough about Chrom to move him down, other than like, yeah, he's worse than Frederick and Robin, but guess what? That's why it's A tier as an S-. So I couldn't find a reason to move him down. So is there anything bad about Chrom that I'm overlooking, I guess, or is he fine in A tier?
I think, he's one of those units, and obviously this isn't a context of hard, but he's one of this is the first unit that we're talking about where the usefulness of the unit really drops when you get to Lunatic. because on Lunatic you're putting all your EXP into Robin to survive, and Chrom just doesn't have room to grow at first, and then he kind of falls behind.
Yeah.
But I do think he's somewhere in the A-ish region, maybe a little lower in A. But he's still very good. Like his combat stats are pretty good. Obviously I try to get him to Cavalier as soon as possible. It has slightly higher growth than Lord. Um, and the base stats are pretty comparable. I as a Lord or a Cavalier, his parrot bonuses are going to be good for basically anyone. He gives speed no matter what, though more speed with Lord. He gives luck with Lord, which if you're running like an arms thrift female Robin, that's pretty nice. Um, or if you're pairing him with like Vaike or someone, because Vaike tends to have low luck. Whereas if you're pairing him with Sumia, Cavalier will give her strength, speed, and defense, which are all stats that she would appreciate. And as you go through his limited support pairs, it's more and more obvious that his Cavalier bonuses really are the most beneficial for most units, just because strength, speed, and defense. Who doesn't want strength, speed, and defense?
Yeah, those are the best stats.
But yeah, I think the thing that holds him back in hard mode the most is that he doesn't have immediate 2 range. I mean, you could give him 11 sword, but why would you? So getting him to Cavalier or even Great Lord and getting him the weapon rank to get javelins as soon as possible is pretty important. It is also nice that he comes with a personal, slightly weaker Worm Slayer. The only problem is that late game, the falchion is not great until you get the upgraded version.
And then the game is
but
over.
Also, yeah, then it's over. But also, a lot of Wyvern Lords are going to end up spawning with both Swordbreaker and Lances. So Chrom hitting the Wyvern Lords is not going to be as much of a guarantee, I guess. But yeah, I think overall Chrom's a solid unit, and I think his best asset is actually his dual strike plus skill, because he benefits from it when someone's behind him, and whoever he's backing up will benefit from it. And when those dual strikes can be with a rapier or a beast killer or an armor slayer or something like that, that's really helpful, especially mid game when you've got a bunch of cavalry and armors and stuff.
Oh yeah, I can imagine that works out pretty well for him. Even if like he's one of the few units who actually has utility in Robin solo, I guess, which is also kind of funny. I just realized.
Yeah.
Okay, so I guess what we can do is we can keep Chrom where he is, and if other people deserve to move over him, we could just do that, because now we've roughly perked where Chrom is going to be. So next is Anna, who I think I just tiered highly because she was helpful when she's around. I'm not sure how to evaluate the fact that her availability is so much worse than everyone. Well, not so much worse, but like a fair bit worse than people we've tiered so far. But I just feel like when Anna joins, she is so good for someone you put no resources in that I wanted to credit her for that, because she has the thief utility, which I think is kind of sketchy in this game, but I guess there's a chapter where it works out. But I think she can also reclass the Sage and be pretty good at that. And then her stats are just like really good, if I recall, like good speed and magic if you want her to have that, or like good enough strength to function. And just a pretty solid all-around pre-promote unit. I think like she's the most important unit for 0% growth most of the time, at least for a part of it, which also speaks to her credit, I think. Because like Awakening, you don't have a lot of units with good bases. It's mostly just growth units. So
yeah.
What happens with Anna?
Yeah, so Anna, I usually just use as a support utility unit. But the big thing for me is that she has good magic and rescue access.
Yeah.
which, that is already
It's
kind of
like
busted.
it's like a free
I
like 7 extra
like,
tiles on someone from the start, right?
yeah, yeah, and I really like, when Olivia comes along, I really like having them be kind of next to each other, because then you can do what I like to call, um what's the word? Discount Gale Force, where you can rescue someone with Anna, dance them with Olivia, and then have them go back into the fray. Um, Discount Gale Force. Don't sneeze at it. Um, I've done Gale Forceless runs intentionally, and Discount Gale Force is very good.
Oh, that's funny.
Um, also, yeah, Thief Utility, uh you know, the lock picking is very good. There aren't a whole lot of doors to be opened, but the big thing is that she can get into chests, and also, especially because there's a bunch in her starting chapter. And if you're doing ridiculous forges, which I guess would be for overkill, I guess, because I find I don't need many forges on hard.
Well, you could like
Um,
forge a javelin or a hand axe, right? That could be pretty nice.
Yeah, yeah.
Because those I
So
think are
if you're
not strong
spending
enough
a
to
lot of
truth
money on
kill a lot.
forges, yeah, her getting access to being able to unlock those bullions is really nice. Um, and like, if my philosophy kind of is like, if there's a spare deployment slot, always slot in Anna, because and just give her like a steel sword, 11 sword, a mend, and 2 rescues. Um, if she gets enough staff experience, she's not that far away from physic either. And her physic healing is actually really nice because of her high magic. Um, but yeah, Anna good.
Yeah.
And of course, she's not too far away from Lucky 7, which can really do wonders for her combat. If you want to have her as a combat unit. I personally rarely use her as a combat unit, partly because she doesn't have the greatest support pool in the world. Um,
It's like
but she's
Robin and some
fine on
random
her own.
people.
Yeah, Robin, and I think Tiki.
All right. I think I might have gotten that support last playthrough. Yeah, one thing I just remembered is that you probably always have a slot for Anna if you're only using like 4 combat pairs. Because does it like 8 units
Yeah,
and then maybe Olivia and then like who else you're gonna deploy, right? Like Libra, I guess.
yeah, yeah. We'll get to Libra.
Yeah. Okay. Sounds like Anna is staying.
Libra is also very good. Yeah, and
Yeah.
Anna, I would even put her above Chrom for utility, but that's just like my personal thing. I think if you don't feel like doing that, she's fine where she is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'll take it. I don't have a big issue with it. I was gonna ask that. Okay. So Cordelia is a unit that I don't know if she should be this high because she's. I don't want to say she joins late, but she joins like after the early game, right? Which is like, it's a little bit. It's not hard to train her up, but I definitely feel like you have to slow down a little bit to do it. So it feels like she's a bit behind, but I do recognize people's complaints about, for example, Sumia's strength. It is a little lackluster, whereas Cordelia has a slightly better strength growth, I think. So she ends up with enough firepower sometimes to kill enemies that Sumia would not. At the same time, there are a lot of ways to strength stack Sumia in a way that she might not need it, like a Frederick pair up and then maybe a tonic and then maybe something else like a rally, and then maybe you're fine. So maybe it's not necessary. I'm just comparing her to Sumia because we kind of already discussed Sumia's performance in combat, and I feel like Cordelia's is similar enough to where we can sort of relate. I did use Cordelia in my last playthrough, but I benched her for a while and then grinded her up a little bit, so it wasn't entirely representative. So Cordelia feels okay to me, but I wouldn't be super surprised if she dropped down just because of her having to play catch up before she can actually contribute. But all the pros to like a Pegasus Knight that can pair up with people, rally speed, Gale Force, whatever those options are, they're all really good. So I don't know if she should drop very far, but she seems like fine, but she seems worse than Anna by like some amount to me as I'm thinking about it. What do you think?
I think she's actually perfect where she is.
Oh.
Um, Obviously, she has the same flyer utility as Sumia. Similar growth, though notably less speed and more strength. Um, she's kind of, I think she's kind of akin to a flying mercenary with her stats and growths. And you can also reclass her to mercenary, if you want to completely ruin her. Because, she doesn't have the best luck to make use of arms thrift, and you lose her flying utility, and then if you want Gale Force on her, it takes so much longer, blah, blah, blah.
Sounds like a bad trade.
Yeah. But, Cordelia's big utility thing for me is that she joins at a higher base level than Sumia. She joins at level 7, Sumia joins at level 1. So it's actually much easier if you're not interested in using her as a full combat unit. It's actually much easier to get her to level 10, insta-promote her to Falcon Knight, and get rally speed right away.
Oh, yeah, so you just have a Falcon Knight that like occasionally rescues rally speeds, and that's it.
Yeah. I haven't super gotten into Falcon Knights, but Falcon Knights having rescue and flight is really busted.
Isn't the rescue range really garbage though?
Sumia's will typically be better because she has a better magic growth. But there are, let's just say, other units that I like to reclass to Falcon Knight for shenanigans to get a higher rescue range. But yeah, the main selling point for Cordelia Falcon Knight is rally speed. And other than that, I think she's good where she is.
Okay.
Just because she has most of the same perks as Sumia. They're very similar units. I'm one of those people who's just like, why not both in this situation? So frequently, if I'm using one, I'm using the other. Just because, why not have more
Oh
super
yeah, no,
destructive flyers?
no, I agree. Like that's a pitfall to only use one, right? But yeah, I guess so. That's fair. I was more mentioning Sumia as an easy comparison than like that one should replace the other or whatever. I guess if you had like a really bad Sumia, you could replace her, but generally, yeah,
Yeah.
that makes sense. For me, it's more like,
The one thing
yeah, go ahead.
the one thing I will say is that, again, this is the personal experience thing, but Cordelia has a lower speed growth, and I find that she is much more liable to getting speed screwed, which is really bad on a Pegasus Knight.
Like to the point where she doesn't double
But
reliably.
yeah, yeah, she'll get to that point sometimes in Lunatic. Not as much of an issue on hard just because of hard mode stats being lower, but it is something to watch out for.
Yeah,
I'd say Sumia's speed's a lot more reliable.
yeah. I think there's something to say for a low strength stat being easier to fix than a low speed stat because, you just need to do more
Yeah.
damage. There's like a lot of ways to compensate for that, especially forges. There's no such thing as like forging speed on a character.
Yeah. And also in this particular game, you get strength and defense tonics much earlier than you get speed tonics.
That's true. I
Um,
remember you get strength and defense really early, like chapter 6 or so, I think.
After you finish chapter 3.
Oh wow, that's so early.
Meanwhile, speed tonics are after chapter 8.
Okay, still reasonable, but yeah, makes sense. Well, by the time, oh,
Yeah.
yeah, no, it makes sense. Okay, so I guess
Yeah.
Cordelia's staying then as well, like right where she is.
Yeah.
This has been a very peaceful tier list review so far. Like most of my co-hosts so far have moved units like 5 tiers down by now, or have shuffled characters around like way more. Meanwhile, mine is almost completely intact. We switched 2 characters. It's very generous of you to preserve the integrity of my tier list like that. So I guess we could just go down to B+, and then if anyone has to move up or down, that's no problem. We can keep the order. So we're at Panne, and the main thing I usually like to mention about Panne is that I don't like her initial class, and I will reclass her to Wyvern as soon as I can, because I think that's the best idea. And I think I remember we had a brief discussion about this, because someone in my comment section was like, well, actually, Mecha, you're way overrating Panne's like reclass to Wyvern with the second seal, because You use an early second seal to not change your stats all that much when you take Beast Stone into account, and then, all you get is Flight. And I was like, yeah, but Flight is a big deal, and also long term, it's so much better, in my opinion. And I think we agreed on that, because I have good experiences using
Yeah.
Wyvern Panne. Like, I think it's one of the better units in the game overall, one of the better uses of a second seal, but I know the second seal is very precious, so she should probably take some flack for taking that and also having to get up to Wyvern in the first place, which is why I have her in B+. But I think overall she's still really solid, and if you can just get the axe rank up by having her fight with the Bronze Axe, she's perfectly fine. Even with the Bronze Axe, her combat is not bad, in my opinion. So I think she's worth the investment, and I think it's worth putting her in B+. What do you think?
I agree. I actually usually, our tier lists are formatted a little differently, but I usually put her in like A minus, so that's kind of
Mm-hmm.
comparable to B plus.
Yeah.
Um, that her Wyvern stats are so ridiculous because, um, when people mention, oh, the stats aren't that much different between Togwell and Wyvern, they're not taking growth into account. Pan as a Wyvern has over 100% HP growth and 50% or over growths in strength, skill, speed, and defense. Um, like, yeah, she will die if you put her in range of a wind tome, but like that's on you.
I mean,
Um,
the Tygwell can't counter at range, so you don't really want to put those in range of a Wind Tome anyway.
yeah. But yeah, she is very good. Um, I think her big downside actually is that her class selection for like end game stuff is not as great, so she kind of falls off in that way.
Wyvern not good?
But um
I guess it's
it
weak
kind
to a
of
couple things,
depends.
yeah.
Yeah, Wyvernlorn's weak to a couple things, and also this runs into something I like to call Pavis lock, where she's using two melee weapons. Um, Granted, this is much more of an issue on Lunatic Plus because that's where you actually run into Pavis enemies. Um, but like on regular hard mode, she just once she gets up to hand axes, she just starts murdering everything in sight. Like, uh, she has a really good enemy phase once she gets to hand axes. Like, as long as she's not in range of like a bunch of mages, she's fine. And her strength allows her to one round most things aside from knights and generals pretty easily, especially if she has a good pair up. She definitely wants strength and speed. So like usually I give her stall because Cavalier everyone wants Cavalier pair up bonuses, as I said. Um but I adore using her because she's just she's just that good. Her growths are great. She actually is one of the few units that once you've reclassed her, you can promote her pretty early because she just starts capping things. Uh, I've I've had multiple runs where at like level 16 she's already capped strength, speed, and either skill or defense. At which point you definitely want to promote her.
I'm actually glad you brought that up. That's something I've meant to ask that I forgot to ask for previous units. I've heard people say like you should promote ASAP. I definitely believe that you should second seal ASAP to like preserve your internal level. But promoting ASAP seems a bit risky because I feel like some units do fall off late game if they don't get enough levels under their belt. So Pan is one of the few units you would promote early then.
Yeah, I guess, related to the promoting thing, usually I will promote either if I need the immediate stat boosts, or if I already have two or three stats capped.
Oh, that sounds like
Because
other games
awakening
then.
caps, yeah, because awakening caps are so high, you run into that in units that have not second sealed not as much. Um, but I think, yeah, like you were saying, for a lot of units, they need the extra levels from being in their base class. Um, and part of the other problem is when you promote, no matter what level you promote at, you end up with the same internal level.
Yeah.
So
Unlike second
either
seal, right?
way, yeah. Yeah, like if you master seal someone at level 10 versus level 20, you gain the same amount of experience
Yeah.
for each kill as you would in either situation. At which point, unless you need the stat boost immediately, it's usually better to just wait to promote. Maybe not all the way to 20, because there are some cases where you need to meet a stat threshold or something where it just makes more sense to promote early.
Yeah, and you need to hit your
But
level 5 skill, right? Like that you also delay that by promoting late.
yeah, you delay your level 5 skill, which is why there are some units I would advocate for promoting early, more than others. And also, usually for me, by the time you actually get access to your first second seal, whether it's through Renown or an Anna shop or even the Chapter 8 second seal, usually I find Robin is uh, over level 10 anyway. But yeah, I think when it comes to the second seals, I think Robin gets first dibs.
Oh yeah,
Um
if you're using him,
and
yeah, or her.
and second, yeah, and second dibs would probably be Pan.
Mm-hmm.
Just because Wyvern Pan is so game breaking.
Yeah, it seems like the biggest boost any character can get from a second seal.
Yeah. Aside from Donald, which we'll get to him.
Yeah, we'll get to him in a couple videos probably. So are we done with Pan? She's probably gonna stay here in this tier that is your A minus,
Yeah.
my B plus. So we
Yeah.
can move others around her as we see fit. So from one
Yeah.
wyvern to another, we have Cherche. Or Cherche, yeah. I ask for pronunciations every playthrough and I forget them by the end of the playthrough. I'm sorry. I feel like this is one of those units that if you're playing, I don't want to say optimally, but in a lot of kind of playthroughs, there's an argument to be made that Cherche is not good enough for long term, that you might want to promote her early and just use her like that as like a early promote flunky kind of unit you're planning to bench later. I'm not sure about her long-term prospects as an actual combat unit you train up like a couple levels, but she doesn't really seem like that kind of unit to me. She's always been like a flying utility unit for me that occasionally uses like effective damage to their effect, like kind of like a flying Frederick almost. I think Frederick can fly too, but you get the point, right? You use like beast cutters or hammers or something like that to use her, because I feel like her speed is not good enough to double consistently in the late game. That's the feeling I get with her whenever I field her. I like her a lot. Like I like her design, and I like wyverns in general. I think she has good like bulk and strength and stuff like that. But I feel like she always falls short as a combat unit for me later in the game, especially because, like you said earlier about Pan, Wyvern Lords are weak to like a significant amount of things, like the bows, wind magic. It's obviously a weapon trial disadvantage against something. Might be like a Wormslayer out there. And in Awakening, when the enemies have like high might weapons, that feels like an extra big weakness when you're dealing with triple effectiveness. So generally, I don't like that class a whole lot, and don't really like Cherche's stats a whole lot. That's been my experience. Does that line up with yours?
Yeah. And also, like, for me, so I actually tried to use Cherche multiple times when I was doing my 6 hard mode runs. I actually wanted to use her. I actually used her 3 times
Wow.
because I was trying to figure out basically how to make her work.
Why don't you work?
Um, yeah. The big thing for me was that, in the chapter after she joins, chapter 14, um, without an insta promotion to Griffin and a plus speed pair up, I think she was not doubling generals.
What? I had to process that for a second. Sorry, but yeah, damn, that sucks.
That already put kind of a bad taste in my mouth, especially because in all of those playthroughs, I had at least one other flyer who was doing work in some other way. Like Cherche's main, she comes with a hammer. Her job is to hammer things.
Yeah, that's
If she
what.
can't double things with a hammer, that's kind of bad.
Yeah, so unless you're forced with that
Um,
hammer, you're not one running. This kind of sucks.
yeah. Um,
Actually, she does one hit KO with the hammer against like unpromoted armor knights. I'm pretty sure.
Knights in her joining chapter, she will one hit, I think, with the strength tonic.
Mhm.
Um,
Or pair up.
yeah, or pair up. But yeah, I just found her really disappointing, and that really sucks because I really like her character and her design, as you said. But the way she worked in my playthroughs, and I checked her stats, and she was doing better than average in most cases in most stats. It was either really hard to get her going because of her low base speed, or she would fall off later because her speed growth also isn't good. I actually ended up doing something kind of wacky, because she doesn't have the best skill, so she also can whiff things. But what I ended up doing in 2 of the playthroughs was I reclassed Henry to a barbarian to give her plus strength and plus speed, and also hexathema, as I like to call it. Uh, and that improved her performance, but, like, still by the end, like, as I was recruiting more child units, I was just like, "Why would I not use this other unit that has twice her speed?" You know?
This quick question. You say Hexathema as a combo. Were you pairing? Does that work if you pair up with someone? You just get those bonuses as elite unit?
Yeah,
Oh
so
wow.
because Hex and Anathema are auras, they affect any enemy within. So Hex, it's any enemy that's adjacent, and Anathema, it's any enemy that's within 3 squares. Um,
Wow.
and so not only do you benefit from those bonuses if you're the front unit, with the hexathema unit in the back, other units around you can benefit from that, even if they're several tiles away, as long as they're attacking things that are within 3 tiles of the anathema unit.
I never knew that. I always thought the unit in the back was considered like off the field, basically, like a rescued unit. That's interesting. That's cool.
Yeah, that's how it works in Fates, but yeah, in Awakening, things like Demoiselle, Dual Support Plus, um, Solidarity, Anathema, all those aura skills. Um, and they also count, like in Solidarity, if when the description says it affects any adjacent unit, that also affects any unit that's paired up with you in the back.
Okay. Well, today I learned. Nice. So, circling back to Cherche, the unit, for a moment. So it sounds
Yeah.
like we're in agreement that she's gonna move down somewhere. Now, the big problem that you might know from Tierless reviews is that aesthetics are very important, and so I can't move her into B- physically because it'll mess up my overlay. I can do it if it's necessary. Um, there's another tier that I could put her in, which is a C tier, which sounds kind of low for a wyvern, but it might be what ends up happening. Now, disclaimer: the C tier, I think I've sort of half jokingly used it as C is for children. I just like kind of push the children there because I didn't know where to put them exactly, and they're so
That's what I did too.
weird. Okay, but does it make sense to put it there? Because I feel like D is too low for a unit that has instant utility like Cherche. So I think it should
Oh,
be either
yeah,
B
D's
minus or
way too
C.
low for her.
What do you think?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah, I would say B minus or C. And there are some units I see in your B minus tier that I would move up to B plus.
yeah, I know they're
Uh
gonna be there. Is Lucina one of them? Because I can switch them up and you can talk about Lucina.
yeah, Lucina's one of them.
Okay, in that case, let's put Cherche here. Oh no, oh no, oh no. Boop, no, Sully stay. Lucina goes here for now, and then we can talk about Lucina, because I'm assuming we're done with the Cherche.
Yeah.
Okay.
So yeah, Lucina.
Yes.
Um
Can I give my rationale real quick before we? It will
yeah.
be real quick. Don't worry, because I have not much to say about Lucina. I think her, like, I have some trouble distinguishing like what makes characters unique in Awakening sometimes, but I know personal weapons is always one of them, and Lucina has the Falchion, which makes her. I don't forget exactly how much might it has, but it's a little bit better. I am keeping in mind that you brought up some problems with Chrom's Falchion that might also apply to Lucina, so maybe it's not actually that great. But other than that, she's kind of like a Chrom 2.0 kind of unit with like a better Falchion, but roughly the same class access. But I also know that she's a child unit, so she's gonna like depend a little bit on like who the other parent is, who the mom is. So I guess we can get into that. I have no idea what the optimal mom for Lucina is, I'm just gonna be honest. But I think she's good regardless because of how good her base kit is, that it doesn't really matter that much compared to other units. She seems fine to me. I can see it being B+. Obviously, child units are just always, like, as good as you make them, generally speaking. But Lucina seems to join at, like, a pretty good time for an level unit and just has bonkers growth like everyone. Like, I don't know. Seems good. Seems like a good unit to me. Yeah, tell me about Lucina.
Yeah, so first I want to cover Lucina's base kit. She has the same class access as Chrom, which, Lord Cavalier and Archer.
Yeah.
Yep, also Archer. Um, which means she can actually make a pretty good bow knight, because you'll still have the sword access for Parallel Falchion. Also, Parallel Falchion has better might than Chrom's Falchion.
Yeah.
So
Cav Archer?
she'll be her perf then is more usable at that point in the game. Like usually at that point in the game, Chrom's Falchion gets either convoyed or put at the bottom of his inventory because it's a 5 might sword with worse than an iron sword's hit. It's not the greatest. Lucina's falchion actually comes with some crit, which can be funny in some situations. But yeah, basically, Lucina has access to in my opinion, two of the best classes in the game, especially if you're doing higher difficulty shenanigans. Archer's really good. I think as long as you're not doing Maiden Lucina, she's gonna turn out great. Like I've even done Maribel Lucina on Lunatic Plus, and the fun thing I like to do with Maribel Lucina on Lunatic Plus is have her reclass to a mage briefly and then promote her to Dark Knight. She gets some really cool, diverse offensive stats that way.
Seems so whack. Does it have swords in this game, Dark Knight? I forgot.
Yeah, it's got swords.
Oh no.
It's very silly. But I'd probably say her best moms are Sumia and Robin. Everyone likes to, put down Sully because she doesn't give Lucina Gale Force. But Sully's base class kit is actually pretty good for Lucina. Especially she gives her access to my favorite personal class, my personal favorite class, which is Assassin. Um,
Oh no.
Lucina already coming with Aether and having the potential to inherit Luna, plus Assassin's high skill, just leads to absolute carnage, which I think is funny. With Robin or Sumia as the parent, she can easily get Gale Force. She can also technically with Olivia and Maribel, but I don't like putting either of them through Darkflyer on hard mode. I would not recommend it.
I can see why.
Lucina's one of those child units where she has a pretty good base kit, and then aside from Maiden, all her mother choices just make her even better.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, Lucina I think is the best child unit, maybe excluding Morgan.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that fits for the only child unit you're required to recruit.
Yeah, that seems fair to me. Okay. So do you think Lucina is better than Panne then, I guess is the question, because she's been moved into B+.
Yeah, I mean, Panne just has more availability.
Yeah.
But Lucina absolutely wrecks things by automatically coming with Ether. I guess I kind of see them as a little bit interchangeable because they're good, but for different reasons.
Yeah. So a little bit of apples and oranges. I guess I can just keep them the way they are. Like,
yeah.
I can see it. We're about an hour in. We can do how about we do Vaike and then round it off for today. And then we can continue some other time. So Vaike, first of all, became one of my first absolute new favorite units to use in my playthrough because I got the imposing axe both in chapter 1 and I think chapter 2, or prologue in chapter 2 or something like that. And so he didn't forget his axe. He actually brought his axe. And then in addition to that, he also brought a Frederick pair up and he one-shot enemies in chapter 2, which I thought was so stupid that I had to do it. I made some funny intros off of it, at least if I may say so myself. So that made him like really, really fun for me to use. For those of you who don't remember or weren't there, Imposing Axe is like a really high, randomly findable axe that has like 10 uses, but it has so much might that, yeah, Frederick and Vaike can like one-shot enemies with it early on, which is very dumb and very awakening. It's very in character. But normally speaking, I think Vaike is like okay. I second sealed mine, and I think he became a little bit over leveled, so I don't have a great accurate portrait of how good he is on average, like normally. I think I put mine through Barbarian. He got despoil, so I started using him a lot to get gold, so I can grind other units more easily, and so that kind of got out of hand. But Barbarian did seem to improve his offense quite a bit, which I liked. And generally, I think his base kit seems kind of good. Like, obviously, he has a great amount of strength, and he can get enough speed from pair-ups to double. And then he has access to... I think he can become a hero and then get soul, which seems like a pretty good thing. Or he can get arm thrift, too, when I think about it. So, a lot of, like, interesting options.
He can't get arm thrift. He doesn't have Merc.
Oh, right. Okay, so you can't... Yeah, you can't get Merc if you just go hero. Okay, you're right. Never mind. It's not Fates. Yeah, so okay, no arm shift, I guess. Unfortunate. Soul's still kind of good.
He doesn't need it.
Yeah,
yeah.
He doesn't have like a. I guess if you want to preserve the imposing axe, though, you do need arm shift. Unfortunate. But yeah, I had a good experience using him. I'm not sure how much it reflects his actual utility. I feel like his long-term combat holds up a little bit better than Cherche's, just because his class and like combat stat seems a little bit better. I'm not sure if they stack up against instant utility through flight, as well as Cherche's other random benefits. So I'm not sure how much I've moved him around, if any. But again, my experiences with using him don't really reflect the standards of this tier list. So I'm curious what you have to say about Vaike.
Yeah, so I also personally like making him a barbarian. Usually because I have so many units that are in line for that second seal, I don't get the opportunity to, but he makes a really great barbarian. It boosts his speed and strength, and he also gets he also has high enough base skill and skill growth that the low skill growth of barbarian doesn't really mess with him too much. Whether you want to keep gamble on him once he learns it is really up to you. Kind of that high risk, high reward situation. Because gamble will be enough to push his hit into the mid 80s, depending. Which, if you want to roll with that, that's up to you.
What does gamble do in this game again?
It's -5 hit plus 10 crit.
Okay.
And yeah, my biggest use for him, and this is going to sound really bad given how much you like him, the biggest thing I've used him for in Lunatic and Lunatic Plus is for him to be an unequipped punching bag.
To bait enemies?
Yeah, he has so much HP to start with. And with like a long coup pair up, he can avoid getting doubled. And you know, sometimes if I just need to pull a wyvern away from Robin, I'll just put him in range, and he's just chunky because he can survive Luna plus hits. And he's also very good for like messing with enemy AI, because you can put him like just out of range of an enemy, and like if you put him just out of range in one place and Robin just out of range in another place, oftentimes the enemy will go for him because they don't see his high HP, but they do see his low defense and him being unequipped. So he's good for drawing enemies. He's good for taking hits. He's an extraordinary punching bag for the early game, and I feel so bad using him that way, because like with some investment he can actually be a pretty good unit. His speed is better than average, and especially once you level him up. And soul means he can last quite a few enemy phases. But that's the main thing I do with him on Lunatic, and I feel so bad for it.
I love the punching bag idea. Kind of hate it for obvious reasons, but also kind of love it. But I mean, so what do you think about the assessment of like his combat versus Cherche that I made? Cherche.
Yeah, I think because they both have hand axe access at base. I think, and usually when I'm comparing two units that have such different join times, I think, what would Vaike's performance be if trained at the time that Cherche joins?
Yeah.
And honestly, I would usually rather use Vaike. He can also do pretty good damage with a hammer, and he's more likely to double. And he usually won't have soul at that point, but Cherche has no access to soul. Vaike will get it eventually, and it cannot be understated how much soul allows you to just trivialize enemy phases.
Mm-hmm. So what kind of proc rates are we looking at for his soul? Generally speaking, like 20% per attack or something?
His skill actually grows pretty fast, surprisingly enough.
Yeah, and hero is good, right? So
yeah. So I'd say if he's promoted by the time Cherche joins, that's at least 25.
Seems pretty good. But he still thinks Vaike feels like a B- more than a B+, because I feel like he's not as good as Lucina and Panne.
Yeah, he's definitely more B+, but I would put him above Cherche.
Yeah, so that's about right to me. Alright, Vaike moved one spot up. My mission was accomplished. This is all we can... This is all I can do for him, realistically, without, simping too hard for the teach. Alright. Finished off strong, literally and figuratively, with Vaike. I'm getting a little bit exhausted, so hopefully we'll be back with another video soon enough, refreshed, and we can talk about Gregor and Tiki and everyone else who followed. It looks like we have quite a bit of discussion to go, because there's also some characters that I haven't tiered yet in a big tier list. So, Casey, thank you for joining, and thank you for sharing your expertise. Hope to see you again next time.
Thank you for having me.
For some Gregoring. No problem, and see you later.
See ya.